Raise your hand if there's an exercise that someone who is jacked convinced you was stupid and that if you did it, you'd be wasting your time. Raise your hand again if you decided one day that you're a rebel and you're gonna do that exercise anyway. Raise your hand again if that exercise ended up being exactly what you needed to do to get jacked. All of us have stories where we did something that was not optimal and then we got the best gains of our life doing whatever we were told was stupid. I'm gonna share 3 exercises with y'all today. That's how we're gonna kick off today's Q&A, give y'all some food for thought. You have to do what works best for you. That's gonna look different for everybody. For me, one big one was like V-bar rows and V-bar pull downs. I don't know if there's some biomechanical science behind this, but I've always found that I got the best stretch keeping my grip in really close like this with V-bar pull downs and with V-bar rows. It just worked really well for me. Probably my favorite lat pull down accessory. Now, also talking a little bit more about the back, cheat rows. I first saw Kaylor Woolham do them. Rick the Stick's very big on cheat rows as well. I found that they didn't necessarily get my lats very big, but they got me strong. It's something that I used to do a lot when I was younger. What they end up being is like an explosive RDL that's really fun, so you just adhere to it and you train it very hard. That's another one that worked really well for me. The last one, and this is something that I got from an OG, Massive Iron, big hairy ugly dude. We were chatting one of these days and he talked about an exercise that he just always thought was stupid. It was the tricep kickback. You know, it's the most Grandma Josephine pink dumbbell exercise that you can think about on paper, right? He specifically said do them rest pause style. So that basically means you do 10, you rest 3 seconds, you do 5 more, you rest 3 seconds, and you just repeat that until your triceps feel like they're about to explode. I'll tell you what, man, I tried it out once and I use it liberally with people that I work with. People that have trouble feeling their triceps on anything, they do this Grandma Josephine pink dumbbell exercise, the tricep kickback, and they finally feel their triceps, and then everything starts to work a little bit better in terms of growing their triceps. So that's my 3. Y'all comment down below 3 stupid exercises that you really enjoy that get you really jacked. All right, that was a lot of fun. The first question isn't actually the question, it's someone's opinion. So y'all can chime in down below with your opinions on this opinion before I offer my input. But the opinion is high bar squats aren't morally superior. You don't have to do them if that doesn't fall within your goals. Like I said, let me know how y'all feel about that before I offer my input. But I struggle with that just because, just pragmatically, okay, it makes sense. If it doesn't fall within your goals, don't do it. But I also know how people are with statements like these. They use them as an excuse to not train hard. I've had conversations with people where they said, and it could be whatever exercise, I don't do X because I do Y and it works better for me. And then they'll come back later saying, I don't have the gains that I'm looking for. I'm saying, well, did you explore this option? No, I don't do that because it doesn't work for me. Does it not work for you, or are you not doing it because it's hard? That's not everybody, so if that doesn't apply to you, don't take it personally. But what I found is a lot of times we don't do what we need to be doing. For me, that was like quad biased squat work where honestly, I'm using DL weights. It feels really tough, but I'm working my quads. So that was things like front squats, hack squats, leg extensions. Once I started doing those things, all of my other leg-based movements, even hip hinges, started to improve. So you got to ask yourself, does it really not fall within your goals, or are you just not doing it because it's hard? That's just, me speaking to the nonverbal communication that I get from a question like this. Obviously, high bar squats look super cool, especially if you do them ATG. If you're capable of doing that, in my opinion, you better be replacing them with something that works even better for the purpose of getting big legs, because it's one of the best leg builders that you can do if you're capable of doing it that way. That's my opinion, though. Y'all let me know what you think. This Q&A is going to be fully time-stamped, so please check out a specific portion if you want to get to the part that you're most interested in. I also implore you watch the whole thing because these are frequently asked questions. I always refer people back to these Q&As when they have questions about their training. So I do advise that you watch the whole thing. And then if you have additional questions, go back and check out those old Q&As as well. This one is going to be, the first question, proper question, is going to be a major key for people. Home gym solution for adductor training. So for me, adductor training, like direct adductor training, not just like wide stance squats or whatever, has been something that has really helped improve my squatting strength, and then by proxy my deadlifting strength as well, because squats are a good accessory for deadlifts for me. Since I have a hingy squat, deadlifts are obviously a hip hinge. Copenhagen planks, man, it's very simple. I'm gonna put a clip up on the screen, but essentially it's exactly what the good girl bad girl machine is, except for you don't need any equipment. Now, am I gonna lie to you and say that it is as effective as that machine? No, it's not. But you'd be surprised how difficult they are, especially if you've never directly trained your adductors before. You could have a pretty strong squat and have never trained the adductor machine before and feel like a pencil neck on that machine, just because it's a very specific type of strength and hypertrophy that you build by just training adduction. That's the best thing that you can do for your adductors at home. Now, if you're down bad and you just don't have like a bench or something to put your leg on, a chair, you could put a plate on the floor and then just slide it into your body. That better makes sense, but that's like in the trenches type stuff. That's gonna be the best way to train your adductors. All right, this next one is gonna be applicable to a lot of people. I'm under no illusion that the average person that wants to get big and strong is going to use RPE in their training. It just, all the numbers and not having a sense of definitive direction with your training programming, it works really well for some, it does not work very well for the average person. So this person asked, how can I avoid using or relying on RPE? It confuses me. I brought the whiteboard outside. We are going to just put down some numbers and examples so that you can, conceptualize what I'm talking about. All right, we changed the POV. We got the whiteboard on deck. So essentially what I like doing to avoid using RPE, what do I like to say? Methods are many, principles are few. The point of RPE is to make sure that you do not go too hard too often, and that you have ebbs and flows to your training. So you have your peaks, your valleys, peaks, valleys, peaks, valleys, and so on. That's how you get stronger. Periodization, in terms of scheduling your training in a really complicated way, isn't as vital for hypertrophy, but it's very vital for strength. So you just can't follow an upwards trend of just progressively overloading weight with no end. It just doesn't work that way. Here's something that I picked up from two OGs, Ed Cohn, Dan Green. If you don't know who those are, Google Ed Cohn powerlifting, Dan Green powerlifting. What they essentially say is that you can make strength training very easy and predictable over a 10-week period if you just set up 10 weeks of training, and each week you're just looking to improve upon your numbers that you hit in each of those weeks. Now, here's a way that you can auto-regulate that training, meaning, all right, if I feel good, I'll go for this. If I feel bad, I'll go for this, is to just have numbers on the books in terms of what you can hit as a tough set for varying rep ranges. So obviously, your 1 rep max is going to be your training max. So we'll just say, for example, you can deadlift 500 pounds for 1. That's like, on a good day, that's what you can do. On a good day for 2, you can do like 470 for 2, and so on. I'm just going to plug in numbers here because they don't specifically matter. As I said, these don't specifically matter. Just track on what I'm saying here. So these are all the numbers that you hit on a good day. These are like your rep PRs, right? Let's just say, for example, you were scheduled to improve upon your 4 rep set. So that'd be like 425 pounds instead of 420. But you feel bad that day. It's very simple, guys. You take 420, you times it by 0.9, And then I don't know what that math is off the top of my head, but I'm going to guess that's something like 390. Some math whiz in the comments that could do that mental math can correct me if they want to. But you better use mental math. Don't pull out a calculator. What this it basically ends up doing is that you're still doing something that is 90% of whatever your best is. That's still enough to give you a training stimulus, but it's also a lower amount of weight, so the fatigue on your body is going to be lower as well. What this does is it lowers your fatigue so that the next week you can come back and you can do a +1 on that 425 more than likely. Or you can choose to do a +1, and by +1 I mean increase the amount of weight that you can do. Or you can do a +1 on like your 5 rep set, so instead of 400 you do 405 for 5 and so on. What this does is it opens up your training to have essentially what RPE does for you. You have your peaks, your valleys, and you have your way of being able to decide when to go easier and when to go harder. For people that need numbers down and they don't want to have to guess what their top set is going to be for that day, have numbers on the books and then have a reduced version of it. The rule of thumb is you take whatever your best is and you multiply it by 0.9. You take 90% of it. Very easy. That's what I do myself. Guys, I don't like to think about my training too much. I'm very busy. I have a lot of responsibilities that I juggle, and worrying about how I'm going to structure my training is not one of those things that I want to worry about. This is something that I do myself, very, very effective. All right, that last one is going to help a lot of y'all out. A lot of y'all do not want to use RPE. Like I said, I'm under no illusion. So let me know. Try that out. If you have any questions, let me know. The next question says, how can you incorporate more intense cardio into your weight training program without impacting recovery? So again, I like to address the nonverbals in questions and address what you're really asking me. I'm going to assume you want to do one of two things with the more intense cardio. You either want to get really good at running, which is going to be some of you, but most of us just want to get the conditioning aspect of more intensive cardio. And we think intuitively, okay, if I just run or sprint or something like that, that's going to be very, very effective for increasing my conditioning. Yes, that's true, but there are also fatigue costs on your knees and your hips and such that come into play with like running, sprinting, hill sprints, 6120s, things like that. If you are just conditioning minded, there are a lot of ways to condition your body. Some are better than others in terms of including it in a weight training program. This is where the strength and conditioning comes into play. Air bikes are very, very effective. They're going to be your best means of adding conditioning, hard conditioning into your training program. Where if you do something like a 6120 sprint, so that's you sprint for 60 seconds, you jog for 120 seconds, and then you just repeat that for intervals, that's going to be very effective in conditioning you, but it's also going to like fry your quads, fry your knees and things like that, fry your hips. Whereas if you do that same 6120 on like an air bike or something like that, it's not going to carry the same fatigue costs. It's going to improve your lung capacity. It's going to further condition you, arguably just as well, but it's not going to come with that same fatigue cost. So look at things like that if you're looking for conditioning. Now, if you're looking specifically to get good at running, guys, I always say that you need to break your training down physically if you're more athletically minded. So if you want to get good at running, have a period of your training where, you know, weight training is accessory to your running. And then have a period where, you know, like I said, you're doing things like the air bike, you're decreasing your mileage in terms of the amount of miles that you're running. There's such a thing in running called junk miles. It's just like junk volume in training. If you have too many junk miles and your focus is just to get jacked, well, it's going to start impeding in your recovery in terms of getting jacked, and vice versa. So I would just break it down into, okay, I'm focused on running right now, improving my mileage, improving my speed. Weight training is just I'm maintaining my muscle mass, and then the other way around. That's if you want to get good at running specifically, or swimming, or whatever it is that you want to get really good at. That's how I would break it down. Next one is also a good one. This is a very, very common question. What are your thoughts on a beginner or intermediate level lifter doing unilateral work just for muscle imbalances. So it's a very common train of thought that we all have as, trainees. One of my legs looks a little bit bigger than the other. What should I do? Just train the other one a little bit more? Yeah, I mean, that's how I would approach it if I cared about something like that. Like one of my legs being the exact same size as the other, or arms or shoulders or whatever. I just intuitively would just do a little bit more volume on the one shoulder. And that's how I would do it. Now, in terms of if beginners should do that, like people new to the weight room, in my mind, it's hard for me to reconcile the thought that a beginner can accurately assess their physique and say, yeah, one of my arms is bigger than the other. And then, no disrespect, both your arms are broomsticks, or one of your pecs is bigger than the other one, and you have a lack of development overall. I would say focus on your foundational stuff first. So good rep quality, make sure you're getting enough sleep, do good exercises, and consistency. Over time, you'll start to develop more size, and then you'll be able to see definitively, okay, yeah, one of my shoulders is a little bit bigger than the other one, or one of my lats is a little bit bigger than the other one. And then that's where, when you start to get more towards that intermediate level of strength and development and experience, that I could say that you could confidently start doing some unilateral work, because body dysmorphia is real, especially in someone that feels like they're small. You're a beginner level lifter, you just started 3 months ago, you're not going to view your body as objectively as someone I feel that would have more experience and a little bit more size on them. So that's how I would break it down. If you're a beginner, yeah, you could. If you're super objective, mostly that would work if you have a prior athletic background and you already have that lifter mindset. But I would just focus on the foundational stuff. Wait till you're a little bit more seasoned and then start to incorporate the extras. Always focus on your meat and potatoes. What is my go-to oblique exercise? I love training my abs. I've dialed it back a tiny little bit just because I'm starting to do heavier deadlifts, heavier squats, and I want my core to be fresher for those things. So typically I'll just wait to train my core on my lower body sessions. But my favorite oblique exercise in general is just the good old-fashioned, Rocky Balboa sit-up where you're twisting. To me, it just looks cool, and I get a good contraction on my abs. It's very intuitive. You don't need any equipment to do that. As long as you can anchor your feet under something like a couch, the fridge, if you have no space in your living room for some reason, under a dumbbell rack, you can add load to it by putting the weight on your chest or behind your head. And then, like I said, it's just a sit-up, except for you take this elbow and you crunch it to that knee. You take this elbow, you crunch it to that knee. Very, very good oblique stimulus, and it also works your middle core very well. I don't know the biomechanical term for it off the top of my head. I'm a caveman, but it works your abs, your six-pack muscles, your obliques very well. And then it just looks cool. So that's my go-to. Next question is a little bit more in-depth from my boy Vald. I meant to answer this question last week, bro, or not last week, the last time I made one of these weekly Q&As that come out bi-weekly. Guys, listen, I'm like an artist. You gotta let the artist, develop their art. Just expect for me to be a little bit late if I say I'm gonna do something a week from now. That's just one of my quirks. But Vald had a very good question, and this is something that will apply to a lot of you guys that have, for lack of a better term, milked a lift. He asked, do you believe, or what are your thoughts on desensitizing a lift for better gain? So what that means is you stop doing something. So say, for example, in some bizarre reality, I stopped Larson pressing or doing seal rows. I would desensitize, what's up, bro? I would desensitize myself to that stimulus from the Larson press or the seal rows or whatever. Stop doing it for like 2 weeks, come back to it, and then the stimulus will be a lot stronger. Mike T, I'm not even gonna butcher his last name. It's like Toucherer. I've never heard it said out loud, even by the man himself, but he is arguably the best powerlifting coach. And this isn't even a contentious statement because he's an OG. He's a really big fan of what he calls pivot weeks, pivot blocks, and so on. I've used it myself. I learned it from him, watching his content, seeing his different posts on Instagram, wherein you use non-specific exercises to resensitize yourself to the stuff that you really want to train. So for powerlifting, that's you stop competition squatting, stop competition deadlifting, stop competition bench pressing, and then do some variation of those things. Or it could even just be, hey, look, you replace competition bench press with like dumbbell bench for a couple weeks. You come back, you know, the regular bench press is going to be that much more stimulative because you didn't do it. I'm not telling you to do that specifically. That's just an example so you can get the principle. I'm a really big fan of that. Now, I don't use it a whole lot myself personally, just because the occasion for me to use that doesn't come very often, because believe it or not, guys, you can milk a lift for a lot longer than you think you can. My main exercises have not changed. When did I start lean bulking? Like 8 months ago. 8 months now, my main exercises have not really changed all that much. I have not stopped bar pressing. I have not stopped squatting with the safety bar. I have not stopped doing stiff leg deadlifts. I have not stopped doing seal rows. Like, all of those things have remained constant. I just haven't had the occasion to have a pivot week myself. But when the time comes, it's going to be super effective. So that's a great question. Last question is from BQ. He essentially asked, like, dude, how do I warm up for a top set without just doing too much and still ensuring that I warm up very well? That's a very common problem that people have as well, especially if you're newer to a lift. They're like, okay, how do I warm up for this without doing too much? And then not only that, but warming up to a weight that ends up just being too hard for me. We're going to change the POV again. So that's a great question, and it's very easy to do if you have some experience with what you can hit. Say, for example, for a decent set of 7. So let's just say on bench press, you know, you can hit a pretty decent set of 240 times 7. And that's what you're working up to roughly today, because you want to do 245 times 7. You want to do your +1. You want to add a little bit more weight. I would do what I call, and what is called in powerlifting, ascending sets. So you start with 135. You do that for 7. You rest like 2 minutes. You do 185 for a set of 7. And then once you get to like 95% of whatever your top set weight is, so let's just say you get to 225, for example, and you do that for like 2 or 3 reps, and you already feel that, like, dang, this is going to be hard. Like, if I move up to 240, I might only get to like 6 reps. That's where you stay at 225 and you just do your 7 reps. If you feel that once you do 7 reps that you have like a rep or 2 left in reserve, you're honestly right where you need to be for that day, and then you just do your back downs accordingly. So you would do like 185 for 3x10 or whatever. Now, if you do 225 for 2 to 3 reps and it just feels gas, you're like, dude, my delts right now, my pecs, my triceps, they're full. And I could definitely do 240 for like 8 to 10 reps. Then you do 240 and you do that for 2 to 3 reps. And you're like, yeah, this still feels easy. I'm gonna move up to 245 and I'm gonna do my 7 reps. 9.9 times out of 10, if this feels easy, you're gonna be able to get that +1. Now, 9 times out of 10 as well, if 225 for 2 to 3 feels kind of junky or hard and you've already adequately warmed up, it's smart for you to stick here for that day. Like I said in the RPE example, it's all about peaks and valleys. Your top end strength sometimes is gonna be down here for no reason other than you used your top end strength here, fatigue came into play, you get a little bit weaker, you do your weaker top set, you climb back up, and then your top end strength increases again. That's the principle behind it. So that's what I do personally. That was a great Q&A. It was a lot of fun to make. Let me know if y'all have any questions down below about these questions, or just questions that you want me to include in future Q&As. Let me know if y'all like this format of, you know, we start off with a tidbit, we get into an opinion, and then we get into the questions. Y'all have a good one.